Okay, sweet. Let's go ahead and get into part three. In case you missed the first two, hi, I'm Sam Gardner. I'm a recent graduate from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I've been working with Parker, PGY4 psychiatry resident, and his advisor, David Morrison, to put together a curriculum on organizational and occupational psychiatry. And this is part three. So again, just before we begin, it's important to disclose that we don't have any conflicts of interest or financial disclosures. And throughout this presentation, I'll be using the term org psych. And for the purposes of this presentation, it will be used to refer to organizational psychiatry and organizational psychology topics. And there's a lot of overlap between these fields, but it's important to remember that they are in fact two separate things. So in part three, we're going to be looking at all of the components that sum together to set the foundation for a healthy workplace. And to do this, we are going to look at the framework put out by the US Surgeon General. So there's 5 primary pillars of mental health, and it's all centered on maintaining and promoting worker voice and equity. So the first component that we'll look at is the notion of protection from harm. And of course, this is creating and maintaining conditions to support physical and psychological safety. So there's 2 facets to this. There's safety and security. Safety can be things such as protection from harm, both physical and psychological, protection from injury, protection from illness, and protection from discrimination. As well as in terms of security, this can look like financial security as well as job stability, both of which can have implications on not just psychological well-being, but physical well-being. And so some of the key components to ensuring strong protection from harm are prioritizing physical and psychological safety. So it's important to, regularly examine the workplace and make an effort to eliminate threats or hazards to physical or psychological safety. It's also important to regularly design and implement changes to improve safety and protection from harm, and then have regular evaluations of safety. And then another key component is that it's important to enable adequate rest. So as we kind of touched on in our example in the last part on burnout, not having adequate rest is associated with a lot of negative consequences. And this isn't just limited to healthcare. Across the board, non-adequate rest is associated with increased injury and risk of mistakes. Long hours are associated with greater levels of exhaustion, anxiety, and depression. And then fatigue is also associated with lower productivity. And then the last key component in ensuring protection from harm focuses more on, I guess, the psychological side, and it's operationalizing DEIA norms, policies, and programs. And so it's been recognized that a celebration of diversity decreases stress and anxiety. And I think this makes sense, kind of as we've looked at in earlier sections. Having a strong sense of community and belonging and good interpersonal relationships goes a long way towards promoting mental health, and promoting DEIA norms and policies and programs is a large part of this. And so it's also important to ensure that these policies are actually in place and that they're consistently enforced. And then, of course, inclusive leadership kind of paves the way for a supportive work environment. So the next pillar I'll cover is the idea of connection and community, right? So fostering positive interactions and relationships to support well-being. And this kind of has 2 dimensions. There's social support and there's belonging. In terms of social support, this can look like having strong social networks and relationships, which can offer you help and support when in times of, I guess, physical or psychological need. And of course, decrease loneliness and isolation. And so in terms of belonging, it's important to feel accepted as a member of a group. And again, as I've touched on throughout this presentation, having that sense of belonging and community is vital to strong mental health. So the key components in fostering and ensuring connection and community are striving to create cultures of inclusion and belonging. And then again, this is related to some of the concepts in the last pillar. We want to strive to decrease bias, discrimination, and inclusion, And in doing so, encourage connection, encourage community. It's important to strive to cultivate trusted relationships. So this looks like ensuring clear and consistent communication. And this could be between leadership and employees or between coworkers. And part of this is explaining key decisions, sharing some of the rationale, creating an environment of trust and inclusion when it comes to workplace decisions. And then it's also important to model trust, right? Making a real effort to get to know workers, whether this is leadership getting to know their workers or coworkers getting to know each other. It can bring down maybe some of the initial walls that people have up when first meeting each other, allowing creation of true and strong community and connection. It's also important to foster collaboration and teamwork. And this looks like being intentional when it comes to building teams, intentional in your communications and intentional in your collaboration. And from a leadership side, it's essential to provide effective collaboration tools to encourage this and make it easier for employees. And then it's also important to allow time for non-work connection and service, right? I think it's often these non-work times when you can form the strongest connections with coworkers and really develop a feeling of community and belonging. So the next pillar that we'll cover is work-life harmony, otherwise known as work-life balance. And this is just the ability to integrate work and non-work demands without significant conflict, right? Having strong sense of meaning and feeling and purpose at work, but also having that outside of work. And so the two elements that kind of comprise this are autonomy and flexibility, which are similar and quite related. Autonomy looks like having control over when, where, and how you work. And flexibility is kind of having the ability to work when and where is best for you. And so some of the key components in ensuring strong work-life harmony in the workplace is providing more autonomy in how work is done, right? So having decreased turnover is associated with increased productivity and satisfaction. Having an unpredictable schedule is associated with a number of negative consequences, from economic hardship to tolls on both physical and mental health. And it's also important to not penalize workers when personal needs arise. Of course, this happens to everybody. And the next key component is increased access to paid leave, right? So limited access is associated with a number of negative outcomes, such as infection spread, decreased productivity, burnout, and all of this can ultimately lead to labor shortage. And then on the flip side of this, strong access to paid leave is associated with just general better health, as well as higher employee retention. And lastly, it's important to have strong boundaries between work and non-work. So one component of this could be not penalizing a worker for missing work, whether that's due to personal reasons or whatever reason. And this is associated with lower rates of anxiety. And then it's also important to strive to limit digital communication outside of work hours. So having like a clear boundary, when you leave work, you're truly leaving work and you're able to go home or go wherever and not necessarily bring work with you. The next pillar we'll cover is the concept of mattering at work. Right? And this is just feeling like you matter to the people around you, and you feel that the work that you're doing is significant and meaningful. So the two components of this are dignity, which is more of the on the interpersonal side, feeling respected and valued by your coworkers and by leadership. And then there's also meaning, which is more internal, having like a strong sense of the broader purpose of your work and the significance and meaning in what you do. And the key components in ensuring this are at a base level, providing a livable wage, a wage that's equitable, stable, and predictable. And so kind of as an example of this, increased minimum wage is associated with generally improved health as well as decreased racial disparities. And it's also important to employees have easy and strong access to benefits kind of as applicable. Another key component is that it's important to ensure equitable opportunities for engagement. So this could look like, routinely involving employees in kind of the goals and planning and objectives of your work, kind of giving more involvement into like the planning and execution and everything, helping to foster a stronger sense of meaning and purpose. It's also important to measure well-being regularly. So this can be done with surveys or other validated tools, and just allows workplaces to kind of keep a pulse on how their workers are doing, and their personal perception of both the meaning of their work and the sense of mattering at work. And then lastly, it's important to build a culture of gratitude, recognition, and meaning, right? So having a shared purpose, working with others towards a collective goal is associated with greater pride, associated with greater, concept of the meaning in your work, greater motivation, and decreased perceived stress. And it's also part of this is the significance of acknowledging and expressing gratitude and recognition to the roles of both of individuals, team, and departments as a whole. And the next and final pillar is having the opportunity for growth. And of course, this just means offering routes to accomplish goals and grow skills. And so the two facets within this are learning and accomplishment. And learning is just the process of acquiring new skills and knowledge, and an employer facilitating an employee, wanting to better themselves or learn or grow. And then there's accomplishment, which is the employee's feeling of achievement upon meeting their goals and feeling like they're having an impact in what they do. And so the key components of this pillar are offering quality training, offering educational opportunities, and offering mentoring opportunities. This conveys, a genuine interest in worker development and true, opportunities for workers to grow themselves personally and grow in their career. This also looks like personal encouragement, having access to strong professional coaching resources, and having access to mentorship opportunities. Another key component is that it's important to foster both clear and equitable pathways for career advancement, right? There needs to be a transparent path that someone can follow in advancing their career and being able to, for lack of a better term, climb the ladder, move their career forward, and grow both as an employee and as an individual. And so to do this, it's important to have strong access to resources and tools that actually facilitate and support this advancement. And then lastly, it's important to ensure relevant and reciprocal feedback. So this could be between employees and leadership, or between coworkers. And it just looks like providing guidance on strength and growth opportunities, facilitating, advancement. And then this also includes providing leadership training, facilitating strong leaders that are ready to both grow themselves personally and encourage growth in the people who work under them. And so this, wraps up the 5 pillars. And kind of as you can see from talking through each of them, there's a lot of overlap and relatedness and connectedness between them. But if all 5 are in place in a workplace, that kind of paves the path for establishing, a culture conducive to strong mental health. And yeah, so that wraps up section 3. And for section 4, I'll be passing it off to Parker. So thank you.